What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing the installing the bottom end on the 6.0. So let's get right into it. Alright, so the bottom end finally came back from the machine shop last Monday. It is now Saturday, but the new job that I have, I work 7 to 5, and by the time I come home I'm just so dead tired I don't even want to do anything. So we're going to go ahead and start going through everything. I'll show you what came back from the machine shop. They added some metal, then they grinded it to clean it all up, and they added metal here because the bigger rods and pistons are all bigger, and they're a lot heavier than the 3rd gen rods and pistons. So they had to add weight to the crank. That way I don't, hammer all of the new bearings out once they're all placed in there. So we'll go ahead and try to set y'all back up here again. All right, so let's go for it. So I've actually got you guys on my jack right now because I've got the stupidest tripod in the world. Okay, these here are the main bearings. So the one with the groove in it, this one here, is going to be going on the bottom of the block, or the bottom. The crank's going to sit on top of that, as you can see down here whenever the camera focuses over there. But there is a notch right here in this bearing, and it can only go one way, so don't force it. While the one on the top is going to have that notch to match. Ooh, almost dropped it. To notch right there, and that goes on the main caps. So this with the notch in it and the bearing is going to go down here on the actual block, and then this one's going to go on the cap. So here are those notches I was telling you about. You just got to line those up. I'm going to put this other bearing down because I don't need it right now. And then all you got to do is, not that one. That one, the thrust bearing goes onto. So we're going to skip that and go to the next one. Just line it up. Push it right into place. Just like that. And same with the last one here. You don't really have to worry about getting them straight in that bowl, like this or that, because the minute you put those caps on, it's just they're gonna seat themselves by themselves. So here are the thrust bearing ones. They have the divots in them as well. Oh no, they don't. One does. The other one doesn't. So this is the thrust bearing that goes onto the cap. Here's the thrust bearing itself, and here's the main bearing here. So the thrust bearing basically prevents the crank from going back and forth, while the main bearing prevents it from going up and down. So this one has the grooves in it. So this is the one that's going to go on the block side, and it does have a little divot as well, or like a pin. So you just gotta make sure it lines up. Just like that, and we're good, we're set. So main bearings are installed on the block, and now we're gonna go ahead and put the crank in. You're gonna want to go ahead and make sure that you have some assembly lube. I picked this up from Summit Racing for like $1 or $2. It's not that expensive, but this stuff is pretty much the lifeblood of your engine on that first startup that you do. If you don't have this stuff, all those bearings are going to be dry, and your engine's not going to last very long at all. So I'm going to go ahead and slap some assembly lube on these bearings here, throw the crank in, then we'll do the other side on the main caps. We'll go ahead and put those in as well. On the thrust bearing, make sure you get it on both sides. That way whenever that crank is turning, you don't ruin anything. You could also use engine oil for this, but assembly lube doesn't run off while the engine is just sitting there. Oil will eventually drop back into the pan. This stuff pretty much stays right where it is. Alright, so you're going to want to make sure all the journals on the crank are clean before you drop this puppy in there. And then when you do drop it in there, be careful. You don't want to score up your new bearings. If I can figure out how this thing goes in. Like that. Alright. Yeah. This reluctor wheel looks like it's, what's it called? Warped. In fact, it looks very warped. I'll be pissed if it is. That's all on the machine shop. You saw how discolored it was?
Oh, from the heat?
Yeah.
Yeah, they should know.
What's going on, guys? How are y'all doing today? So yeah, today, I don't even know how to start this. Well, I'll just start like this. Finally got the crank and pistons and rods back from the machine shop, but they ended up fucking me over like two times. The first time, So yeah, anyway, the first time, well, basically, I took the pistons, rods, and the crank to the machine shop to get balance for the 4th gen rods, which are heavier, so they had to add weight to the crank. So they had to drill it out and put heavy metal into it, which basically, into the bob weights, which basically balances all out, because if you put something heavier in there that's rotating at, hell, even idle, 750, 800 RPMs, you're going to hammer out your bearings, and I did not want to do that. So, of course, I'm not in focus, the car is, but anyway. So, they had to weld into the crank and everything, and unfortunately, they bent my reluctor wheel, which is this here. The crankshaft position sensor rides really, really close to this, and I'm going to turn this. Anyway, the crankshaft position sensor rides very, very close to this here, and if this is bent, if it's off by any little degree, the engine will barely even run, if not start, or anything like that. So this is a very important part of the engine. But unfortunately, I don't know how well you can see this, but it is discolored. Like all this right here is the normal color, and here it's like rainbow blue, like heat. It shows signs of being heated up very, very hot. And of course, I don't even know how well y'all can see this. There's a normal spot. Normal, then it starts getting farther and farther apart. So this is pressed onto the crankshaft at like 7 thousandths of interference clearance, or interference fit, or whatever it's called. So you have to heat it up at like 450 degrees, and then you stick it on there, and it's good, it's set. But whenever they were welding on the crankshaft, they got it so hot that it warped a little bit, and when I went to go put the crank in the block, it wouldn't even go, make a full rotation. You could see here, it's nicked right here. There's also a line right here where whenever you rotate it, that's where it would get stuck at. So this right here is the farthest opening piece. Like you can see the distance in between these two plates there versus there. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but it's significantly different when you're actually holding it. And this piece has got two pieces pretty much tack welded together in the middle. So that's very important. So I going to work every day and stuff like that, I ended up coming home and I didn't even want to, work on it because I was so tired. So it took me about a week before I actually started working on the car and putting the crank in and stuff like that. So I put the crank in and started turning it and playing with it, and I realized that it didn't even go all the way around once. So I called the machine shop the next day. Well, that day was Sunday. Sorry. That was Sunday. Machine shop was closed. I called them Monday. They opened at 6. I had to be at work at 7 or 8. So I woke up at 7. So I called the machine shop and I said, "What's the deal? What's the this is what happened? Blah 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 blah." And they're like, "Cool, yeah, just bring it back in." So fortunately, Tuesday I had to grab the crank and everything, and I had to go back up to the machine shop, drop it off, and it was ready by lunch. So I went back and I had pressed on a new reluctor wheel. Excuse me. And all is good, right? Wrong. Came back that night, put the crank in, put all the bearings in on the bottom end. I thought I was recording, but the camera was off. Or not off, but it was dead. It had died mid-recording session. RIP. Anyway, so I put the crank in and I started turning it. I put the crank sensor back in and everything, and this happened. Alright, so here's the crankshaft here. Like I said, put these caps in and the bearings and everything, and then realized that the camera was not recording. So anyway, right here you can clearly see that they added metal there on the crankshaft, and they just welded that piece up together. So here's where they added the metal into one side of the crank. Over here you can see it a lot better. I'm going to go ahead and twist this over. They added a lot of metal here as well. But they actually grinded this weld down. They added some more down here and everything. But the problem that I'm having now is, now that I put the crank position sensor in, the fit between the sensor and the actual reluctor wheel, which is that little black thing down there, is very, 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 very close. So if I take the crank and I rotate it, that weld totally hits. So they have screwed me over twice. It's stupid little shit like this that they shouldn't be messing up on, but they are. Anyway, so that's where I'm at so far. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and grind this piece of crap weld down and hopefully not get metal shavings in my block and everything. So I'm going to go ahead and try to cover this shit up as much as I can, and just use like a Dremel tool or something, and get it all filed down so that way the crank can actually rotate freely without having to hit that sensor. Alright, well, here goes nothing. Alright guys, deed is done. I don't know how well you can see that, but check this out. And there it is, right back to where it was. So that works. So on to the next part. Alright guys, I'm going to go ahead and install the camshaft now. That way I can get this chain to stop dangling all over the place. You want to go ahead and take your cam and just throw a bunch of lube on it. You can't have too much of this shit. This stuff is good stuff. And just go ahead and stick it all over. Make sure you get it all over the bearings and the lobes and everything else like that. Alright, and then be careful, very gently. You're just going to throw this thing in. Alright, and then when it gets there, I find it much easier to take like an extension or something and stick it in this hole here, and that'll give you a little bit more leverage to move it. I don't have an extension on me, so I'm going to use a screwdriver. Alright, she goes in just like that. Alright, so now I gotta find my cam bolts. Lord knows where those went. So, some time has passed since I last turned on the camera. As you can see, it's dark outside now. Everybody welcome Joel.
How's it going?
Joel's been helping me with this build.
A little bit.
Quite a bit, actually. He helped me pull out the 5.3. So, he's going to play cameraman today, and I'm going to show you how to gap rings for boost, throw a piston in, and then how to torque ARP rod bolts. Hopefully.
Fantastic.
If I don't break anything. Knock on wood.
Ghosty. Alright.
Alright, so these are the sealed power rings. This is what I'm using. I didn't really hear very good reviews. Well, I heard no reviews about it, but they are by Federal Mogul. That's how you pronounce it.
Oh.
But anyway, so those are those. So the box that they come in makes it really easy for the piston rings. Top groove, second groove, and then you got your oil controls or your bottom grooves. So really simple stuff. So I'm going to set those back over there. Now you could start with different ones. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the top groove. To gap them, you're going to have to figure out what you're going to want to do. Things slow. Oh. Anyway, you're going to have to figure out what gaps you want to do. If you have an excessive amount of gap, you're going to have lots of blow by. But if you have a ring gap that's too close, under boost they can touch, and then you'll blast your ring land off, which is this little groove right here. You'll blast that piece off and you'll make a hole in your piston. You don't want that. So anywho,
That's how you buy new engines.
yeah, that's how you buy new engines real quick. So for this build, I'm going to do 28 thousandths on the first and the bottom, or the top and the bottom ring. So in order to do that first, you're going to want to go ahead and stick this in there carefully. Ouch. You're going to stick that in there, keep it up high like that, then grab you a piston. I take off the top ring and keep the bottom ring on because, you know, it's flat, and that's how you know that it's going to be at a perfect level. And then you just pop it in like that. And now it's equal all the way around. Then you're going to want to take your feeler gauge, and I have it set to 28 thousandths. I don't know if you can see that, but ooh, now you really can't see it. 28 thousandths right here. And basically what you want to do is you want to feel the gap, and like right now it's not even wanting to go in. So that means that you have to take it out and grind it. Now, you can buy a whole bunch of fancy grinding wheels and tools and shit like that, but I don't have money for that, so I'm going to use a file. You just got to be careful and take your time and go slow. The best way to do it is to grind inwards like this, because this, of course, is going to be burred on the outside after you do grind it, and you do not want that to scratch your piston or your cylinder wall. So I'm gonna go ahead and grind this. Okay, so I did a little bit of filing, so we're gonna try this again. Same thing, stick it in there, use your piston. If I can get it out of this. Oh, come on, man. Totally gunshots right now outside the house. What the fuck? Do you hear those?
Yeah.
Anyway. There you go. Stick that in there like so. Here, let me get my phone. Maybe get some better lighting. Oh, phone's dead. Huh, would you look at that? Basically, you're going to take your feeler gauge and you're going to stick it on in there, and if it goes in there pretty easily, you're good. So that right there is 28 thousandths. So this is the top ring. So the top ring is done. Set that aside. Now you're going to want to go ahead and grab your second ring, which on this one, on the 6 liter, with the Gen 4 rods and pistons, the second ring is a lot beefier than the first ring. So same thing, stick it in there. Hasn't been touched yet. So this piston over here, I put the ring in there, the second ring, and it was already at 28 thousandths. So it's not going to happen every time, but it did in this case. So same deal. Grab your feeler gauge wherever the heck it went. Come on, why is this happening to me? Alright, so same thing. Grab your feeler gauge. Measure for 28 thousandths. This one's a little difficult to get in. It takes a little bit of an oomph, if you will. So this is going to come out and get some grinding. So whenever you do it with this method here, with the file and the actual ring, instead of having the little twisty wheel deal, you're going to want to make sure that your ring ends actually butt up and they're straight. Because sometimes they will butt up and they'll be more of like an angle like this, the one that you've been filing on, or like this. So you're going to want to make sure that they're straight. I mean, yeah, because they need to be straight. It looks like it's 28 thousandths. Yep, cool. Alright, so that one is done. Now for good measure, you whenever you're doing it this method, you are going to want to deburr this, because if you feel this side, it is nice and smooth. You feel this side, I don't know if you can see that, but like my thumb right there is getting caught up. You can hear it too. So you're going to want to go ahead and deburr the sides. That way it doesn't screw up your piston and your walls.
All the important things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't want to have to go through another motor. I hate it when people call it a motor. I don't know why. It's like, oh, bro, what's
like
your
that
truck?
one?
I got the 6.2 motor. It's like, fuck off.
That motor.
Its engine is a whole lot better than motor. But anyway, were you recording that whole time? Oh, God. I'm going to stick that in there.
Just leave it.
Okay. So, now that this is all nice and deburred, it is listos. Now, different rings are going to be different. They're going to be different rings. So this one, there has a little dimple right there. The dimple is going to go up on these particular rings. On the top ring, there is nothing at all. So this one doesn't matter which way it goes. This one has to go up. Why? I don't know, but screw it. So now we are going to grab our rod, which is in the box from the machine shop. Oh, look, there's a dead bug on there. Rest in peace.
Ripperoni.
Oh, don't do it, don't do it. Oh, fuck that. Just get off of me now. God damn. Oh, yeah, by the way, I'm wearing a Mustang shirt because Fords are trash, and I want to get this dirty.
Hell yeah, Ford's trash.
Oh, wow, you have a Ford out there? Never mind. Anyway.
Yeah, no, agreed, trash.
Alright, give this a good wiper downer Rooney. Alright, then you take your bearing and you line up the little dimple piece with the dimple piece in the rod, like that, and just click it into place, like that. And I mean, you don't have to make sure they're even on both sides. I would, of course, before you stick it down in there, but once you tighten up the rod end, the big end of the rod, it'll adjust itself.
Hella exhausted.
This little squiggly ring here is your oil expander ring, and these two little skinny ones are your oil control rings. So basically these go in a sandwich kind of like that on the piston. This can be a girl's earrings or something. No?
The bigger the hoop, the bigger the hoe.
Yeah, you're right. The LS book that I have suggests that you have a piston vise or a rod vise or whatever.
That's cute.
That's cute. Ain't nobody got money for that. So the right orientation for this is the dimple on top of the piston is always going to face the forward part of the block. Of course, there's an arrow right there. I don't know if y'all can see that at all or not. But anyway, so the gap on the oil expander ring, I like to do these first because they're the most delicate ones. It goes in this very, very bottom groove here, like so. And once you got it in there, it's actually quite hard to realize where it is. But on these exact rings, it's right there. I'll see if I can expand it just a tad. As you can see, that little hole right there. So you're going to want these, excuse me. You're going to want the oil expander ring to be at the very front of the piston, facing the front, right over the wrist pin. As for your oil control ring, one's going to go on top, one's going to go on bottom. The one on bottom is going to be placed in this little divot here, more or less.
You show that divot again for us again.
Oh, sorry, a little divot here. We got 1 and 2. You got 1 and 2 on the other side as well, but those aren't important. And then just kind of feel your way around. The proper way is to have a piston ring expander tool, but fingers work great too. Alright, so that's on the bottom. As you can see, this expander totally bunched up. You just gotta set it in its place. Oh man, I got freaking oil on that book. That was a $20 book.
For a whole $20.
Well, hey, look at the bright side. I guess it gives it character. Alright, so the other expansion ring, or not expansion ring, control ring, is going to go on the top, on the other side. So, if I can get this, set that in there, work it around, bring it around town, just like that. So now you have a gap here at the bottom. There's the center of your expander ring, and then here's the top over here on this side. So now you're ready for the lower and upper rings. So remember what I said. The lower ring is going to be thicker and beefier, and you're going to remember that little dimple is going to be going on the second ring. The top ring goes on the top, the bottom ring goes on the bottom, which is pretty easy to remember. So you're going to put that in that little groove there, and then just kind of work it around very delicately, because these things will snap on you, and that's all you need is for a brand new ring to snap on you. The top ring, same thing, but it's going to go on the complete opposite side. So 180 degrees on the other side is where this one's going to go. Same aspect, you're going to put it in that groove there, work it around, and there, now it's in. So from here, you want to grab your piston ring compressor, put it in through the top. Make sure this thing is loose, you don't want to put it in there tight. Okay, and literally, this particular one is tapered. To gently set your rings and stuff in there, like that. And then from here, make sure it's pretty much equal on all sides. From here, you're going to want to go ahead and throw some assembly lube on your bearing. Wash it around. And you're also going to want to go ahead and throw some oil in your combustion chamber.
I have no motor.
And so now that that's sitting in there, and then you're also going to grab a rubber mallet, but I don't have one, so I'm going to go ahead and use this rubbery side of this hammer, and you just tap this and it'll start going in. Alright. Once again. Ready?
Yep.
Alright, so that's now in there. This can get thrown away or whatever you prefer. Listos?
Yep.
Cool. Alright, so now all your pistons are in. Now we gotta just turn this block around and tighten up all the rod bolts. Alright, so here's your standard old 4th gen rod end cap. Now we are going to be doing these ARP rod bolts. So you're going to want to go ahead and take these out. Now a lot of people have trouble doing that because they only go out so far and then they stop. Well, I'll show you a pretty easy way to do it. If I'm using a vise, it's probably not the best way to do it, but screw it, let's budget. Go ahead and stick this in there. Make it snug, nothing crazy, and then I'm going to use these little pliers. Vice grips work great as well. Stick this in here and give it a little prying motion and they come right out. The reason why they get stuck is because I got this little knurl thing that sits in the little bolt hole there and prevents them from coming in and out. Same with this one. Do it the other way. You just go poop and it pops right out. Anyway, so then you're going to want to grab your ARP fasteners. Make sure these little bolt areas are clean. Stick them in there. Grab this doohickey out. I'm going to use this here. Give this a good wipe down. And go ahead and grab your new bearing here. A little bit of assembly lube. That's actually quite a bit. Go ahead and coat this. Take a little bit of the extra, put it on the journal. Alright, and then down here you can see the two little clip deals where the other bearing pushes into place. You're going to want to match these up here with those down there as well. So give it one more little push and make sure it's all seated into place, and then stick this piece on like that. Now these are the cracked rod design from GM, so they only go on one way, and as you can see that is the way that it does go on. It's going to have a little bit of a gap there because those bearings aren't completely sat down yet, and then you're going to want to go ahead and just put these on hand tight for now.
Alright, just to show you guys how we lube these up. Put a little bit of lube right here on these threads right here. Make sure you get yourself a good little glob on there. And you just go ahead and run your finger on around. Make sure you get some nice lube up in those thread bolts. The other place you want to apply some lube is right up here around the head of the bolt, just so that way as we're torquing it down, that doesn't bind up on us and give us any issues as well. Put a little bit over there on this side, a little bit on the other side, and as you torque it down, it's just going to spread itself out as it goes around, just like that. And there you go. That's how you lube them up.
Damn, dude, you're fucking good at talking. I'm not. I say way too much. Alright, so with these rod bolts, the initial pass, of course ARP's instructions says nothing about an initial pass, but I'm kind of going to give it like a GM ARP kind of deal. This one here says right here 40 foot-pounds, but that is the final that's the final torque. So I'm going to go ahead and do what GM says, is do 15 foot-pounds, and then I'll crank it up to 40 after that, and then it'll be all good to go. We did the first initial 15 foot-pounds, and then after that we're going to do what the ARP instructions say, which is 40 foot-pounds. Now, I guess there really is no certain way to do it according to the ARP instructions. I guess you could do 40 pounds here and 40 pounds there, but I'm just going to do it a little differently. I'm going to do like 20-something pounds here, and then another 20 pounds here, and then 40 pounds here, and then 40 pounds here. So I'll show you what that looks like. I'll start off with this one here. So the torque wrench is set to 40 foot-pounds. Gonna go ahead and bring it over, stop just a little bit, and then I'm gonna come over here, stop a little bit, and then I'm gonna keep going to where it clicks. Do it a couple times, make sure it's at said torque, and then finish this one off over here. And then you do the other side, of course, same way. There we go. Now your bottom end is complete. Hell, that only took 4 hours. Alright.
Can't rush perfection.
That is true. We're dicking around too anyway.